Hey, good morning, everyone. So today, what I want to do is kind of give you guys a introduction to RenderMan. This is not necessarily project oriented. I'm kind of just going to go over the general interface and kind of talk about what stuff does inside of this plugin for Maya. The next video, we will talk about the first assignment that you guys are going to be doing. But right now we're just going to be talking about the introduction to the program itself. Okay, so RenderMan, kind of the short of it is a plugin developed by Pixar. It's been around for a long time, I think since they did Toy Story. The kind of inklings of it was a different program, but it kind of got turned into RenderMan, and it's currently a really kind of neat piece of software that we can use. It's actually free for education uses and non-commercial stuff, so that's kind of why we're using it. It's easy to get a hold of. It also gives you really nice kind of professional results, which I definitely appreciate. And it's exactly the same software that we see in the Pixar movies. So we know it's got some really good meat to it to kind of work with. So anyway, in order to get it, make sure you guys go to the Pixar website, sign up for an account with Pixar, and then you can look for the non-commercial version. There's like a link that says like Get RenderMan or something like that. Once you sign up, you'll need to sign in, and then you can go through the process of getting the non-commercial version. Now, the non-commercial version right now, I think is like RenderMan 22.6, maybe it's on 22.7, something like that. So make sure you go ahead and download and install it, and then you should be good to go. For this semester, I mentioned it in the overview of the class video. We're using Maya 2018, so make sure that you guys are all using Maya 2018. The reason why I say that is because there might be some differences in, say, some render settings or shader setup or something like that. So just make sure we guys are all on the same thing. All right. So once you have it installed, what you'll need to do is go ahead and open up Maya, and you should have a shelf button that pops up right here. It says RenderMan 22 point something, and if you click on that, then you're gonna have all of this stuff here. If you don't, check up here and make sure it says RenderMan. If it does not say RenderMan up there, the plugin is not loaded, so we'll need to go in and actually load it. So we need to go under Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and then in here we're going to scroll down to RenderMan for Maya.py and go ahead and click Auto Load and Loaded. And then click on Close, excuse me. And once that's done, then you should have the shelf load and you should have the menu right here load. Okay? Alright. So let's go and talk about kind of what we can do with RenderMan. So this is, I honestly think it's a fairly easy program to use, but that's me comparing this to other rendering softwares I've used in the past. Compared to like something like Mental Ray, which is kind of defunct now, it's actually a lot simpler, at least I think it is. It does a lot of the lighting, math for you kind of automatically, which is really cool. It has a denoise feature, which really speeds up render times, which is pretty nifty. The way it handles passes is kind of clunky, but it's kind of cool. I like it. So it's overall a neat program, but it does have some stuff to kind of figure out. So let's go ahead and create a few objects first, and we'll talk about kind of what we have to do in order to play around with this. So I'm going to go under Create, Polygon Primitives, and we're going to go ahead and create, let's do a cube. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a few of these. So I'm just gonna make in like a little small, almost like a city, I guess, something like that. Nothing, just so that we can kind of show some different lighting features. Okay. And let's go ahead and create a plane. So we're gonna have something like a ground. Okay. Alright, so I believe when you guys went through Introduction to 3D, Edward probably went through and taught you guys a little bit about some lighting and shading stuff. So basically forget all that. You know, kind of joking aside, what we're going to be doing is similar, but we're using completely different scripts and lights and things like that. So all the lighting and stuff and shaders we're going to be using are actually found right here on the shelf. They are actually found in the Hypershade. I'm sorry, not the Hypershade. Yeah, Hypershade. I don't know why I said that. But anyway, we can do it in the Hypershade. But really, like, all the shaders and lights we're going to be using are all going to be very much RenderMan specific shaders and lights. Okay, so things like blends and fongs do not work whatsoever inside of RenderMan. They don't. So keep that in mind, that you may be running into issues. Make sure that you're actually using the correct Pixar node while you're setting your stuff up. So, like, if you go under Create Lights, like, none of these really work. Okay, these are all considered like Maya lights right here. I mean, obviously, like where it says RenderMan lights, like, that's fine, but the Maya standard lights don't work whatever. So we're gonna go ahead and actually create some lights. So if we go back under the shelf, we have these things that look like a sun, a light bulb, a sphere, and basically a light with a box on it. So right here on the very first one, we actually have our standard lights. And so these are basically like area lights, spotlights. Yeah, so basically your kind of basic lights. So what we can do is go ahead and create some of these. And we'll talk about kind of how this works. So with a light, it's very similar to how the ones in Maya work. You know, it looks like a panel. You make it big. It has the thing that points out, shows which direction it's going in, and you know, there you go. But we know it's RenderMan because it has a big R on it. So yeah, so we know we're working with RenderMan here. Now, in order for us to actually render this out and see what this thing looks like, let's go ahead and go to RenderMan, and we're going to go to Preview Render, and we're going to click on that. Okay, so that's what I got. Now, doesn't really look like anything. Kind of looks like there's no light in here at all. And that's partially because we don't have any shaders actually on this. We just have the basic Lambert. So we're going to need to go ahead and put some shaders on here. So I'm just going to go and select all these. And I'm going to go right here, right click. And so these are our basic shaders that we can use with RenderMan. There are some others, but this is kind of the general ones we're going to be using. Pixar Surface, think of that as like a blend. That is your very, very standard Pixar shader. It's very, very useful. It can kind of cover most of your bases. So I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to go to my attribute editor right here. And so if we look at this right here, we have some maybe familiar settings that you guys saw when you were working with like fongs and blends and Lamberts. If you look under where it says diffuse, we have something called color. And we can actually change the color to whatever we want. So let's go with maybe like a baby blue. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and take this back up. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and click render again. You can either do it through going up here to renderman and click preview render. You can also go right here where the R is, or we can also go back here and click R on the keyboard, and it'll actually will render or start to render. So we have a couple options. So a couple things what we're watching here. So there are these little squares kind of dancing around on the screen. What this means is that the shot itself is actually rendering. We're getting a preview, and the boxes are kind of dancing around and refining the image as it goes, and we can actually kind of see the image before it's actually physically rendered. That's really, really useful because a lot of the times we're making like tiny little changes and we just need to see what it changes or what the difference is. We don't need to see the entire render. We just need to see kind of what it looks like just at a glance. So that's pretty useful, and I really like that. So we can see here that kind of a few things that renderman does by default, which is kind of cool, is it does indirect lighting really well. So indirect lighting is basically bounce light. So let's say if you have a lamp on in a room, the light's going to come away from the lamp, hit the wall, and then hit something and illuminate it that may not be necessarily the color, or may not be in the direct path of the light. So that's what indirect lighting is. And this is something that renderman will do automatically for us, which is pretty nice. Alright, so rectangle light right here. So if we click on the light, we can go under rectangle light in the attribute editor. We have under basic, we have intensity. And so that is literally just the intensity of the light. So if I take it from, let's say, 1 to 0.1, and then go back and hit R, you'll see that it's a lot darker than the previous image was. In fact, if we go back over here to our catalog, we can click back and forth and we can see the difference. It's a big difference. So this is like this is 10% of the light that we just had. Now if I go in the opposite direction and do 10 instead of 0.1, we're going to get 10 times the light that we got before. So you see that. So anyway, you get that idea. So let's do maybe 2, and we'll re-render again. So nice, standard. All right. Now next is going to be exposure. Exposure is going to be basically going to be affecting the amount of light coming out of the light itself. So if we lower it, let's say to -3. So you'll see that we can bring the light down itself from before. You'll see that some of the hot spots definitely go down from where they were before, like here to here. And then if I go up to 2, so remember it was set to 0 originally, then we're getting a more exposed image. Alright, take that back to 0. So usually what I'll do is I'll work with the intensity, and then I'll tweak the exposure if I need to after that. So that's kind of how I will work with that. Color, that's basically just going to be the color of the light. So if I change this to, let's do like a red, maybe orange, something like that. I guess it turns everything green. I guess that would kind of make sense though, the red light hitting the blue. Kind of mixes a little bit. Orange light hitting the blue, actually. So we can see more of a direct effect though if we like take this to white. So if I go back, there we go. So now it's orange. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and keep going down. So refine. We can check, we can change different things in here. So something like emission focus, that's going to be basically changing, say, the intensity of like highlights. So if I go here, so now it's not going to be as harsh, and basically kind of bring the focus down just a little bit. Specular mount is going to be basically any area that's going to be shiny on an object. So if like the material is like a shiny like plastic or glass, this is going to be how much the light actually hits on a specular. Same thing for diffuse. So if you bring down like the diffuse, it's not actually going to show very much. Now the reason why it's not showing like at all here is because this material is basically completely just diffuse. There's no actual specularity or anything else on it. It's a pretty flat matte material. So I'm going to use that opportunity to kind of jump into, well, tell you what, let's go through the lights first, and then I'll talk about the shaders, or at least the PixArt surface shader more. But we can kind of work with specularity in it all we want. Okay, so I'm going to bring back up the diffuse amount, and we have something called cone angle. So cone angle is going to be basically the, if you think about putting like blinders on a light to kind of focus where it's pointing, that's what the cone angle is. Okay, think of like if you're in like a theater, and they have, performers on stage, and then they have these big spotlights with like the blinders on the sides. That's what it's going to do for us. So if I go ahead and take the cone angle, right now it's set to 90, meaning that there's really no focusing of the light whatsoever. If I bring it down, you actually will see the cone point in, just like that. So what that means is anywhere outside of this shape is not going to be getting any sort of light, but anything inside is going to be getting the light. So what we can do is we can bring this in, and I'm actually going to shrink down the light so we get a little bit better look. And so now really we should just get like just this square illuminated. So right there. Before, we were getting something like that. Now with the cone angle down, it's just like literally just this little square. So this is useful if you want to get something that's similar to a spotlight. We can use that to create that effect. So it's pretty sharp. Like that shape is really sharp right here. We have a cone softness right here, which is, I kind of think it was like a penumbra, but that's, it's referring to that basically. The cone softness, we can go in and basically soften up that shape right here. So like this. And it looks a little more natural in my opinion. I wouldn't go something that's like completely soft because then it's going to look really weird. It's almost like a Morticia Adams vignette, maybe. Where the way they would put like a light over her eyes. Kind of like the like old Hollywood actresses where they would just illuminate just their face. But that's kind of what that's for. And this is pretty useful if you want to do like a spotlight or something for like a street light. You could use that. All right. I think that'll do it for this one. We have things like light filters we can do, but we can talk about those later. So let's go and switch over to another light type. Disc lights. Disc lights are basically the same thing as rectangle lights. They are just, wait for it, discs. And so this kind of mixed in with the cone is really kind of more of a generic, what you might think of as a spotlight, you know, for like a theater or something like that, since it's a round shape. So obviously intensity, exposure, color, yada yada yada. And then if we go ahead and render that, let's see what we get. It's a nice soft kind of fall off through here. You know, it's not too focused. It's a nice light. In my opinion, I like using these more than like rectangle lights, but rectangle lights definitely have their uses. Like if you want to do like, if you want to do like office lighting, those are really useful because you can kind of stretch them and move them in position. If you want to do something like, you know, like a light from a window, because obviously most windows are rectangular, that also works too. But this is nice. This is, you know, it feels more natural to me. So we're gonna use that, and it's all the same stuff. So we have like a cone and all that we can mess with, and do a cone angle or cone softness. There we go. So that's kind of cool. All right. Let's go ahead and delete you. Okay, distant light. Now, this is kind of like sunlight. This is a light that actually doesn't really care where you place it. It doesn't care how big it is or how small it is. It just really depends on where it points. That's it. This is supposed to basically emulate something like sunlight, where the sun is coming, I want to put quotation marks here, infinite distance away, and all of the photons are coming at a parallel angle onto the objects. Where something with a spotlight or rectangle light, those guys are going to be coming out a little bit radially, coming from a single direction radially away from it, kind of in a spherical shape. So those would not be a good stand-in for something like sunlight. Whereas a distant light is, because the sun is so far away that the way the light falls on the earth, it comes in a mostly almost 100% parallel direction in terms of the photon direction. It's not 100% because it's still a sphere, but it's pretty close. So that's what this distance light does for us. So let me go ahead and turn it on and show you. So you'll see that it's coming in all the same direction. All the shadows are all going in the same direction. It's pretty intense. It's very, very bright. I think it comes on with like a 50,000 level intensity, like automatically. Yeah, 50,000. So it's a really, really bright light. But this is good for doing like outdoors, and it's really, really useful for that. So you got your intensity, exposure, all of that, color. You also have, did I talk about this on the other ones? No, I don't think I did. Right here we have this thing called enable temperature. So this is interesting. So the way that lights work is they have something called a temperature associated with them. So the hotter or cooler that a light physically is changes the color properties of that light. So something that has a higher temperature is going to have a cooler blue tint to it, whereas something that has a lower temperature may have more of a red or orange tint to it. Now this is really neat because we can create kind of unique effects, or maybe make it mimic daylight during like certain periods of the day, where like later in the day, you know, it's a little bit redder. You know, whatever. It doesn't mean the sun's cooling off or anything, but it just, you know, looks that it does turn red. So what we can do is go ahead and click on enable temperature, and you'll see that we're starting off with a 6500 degree neutral temperature. So this should be pretty much white, just as we have here. So looks the same. So if we go cooler, so I'm going to take it down to 4000. We'll see the light shift into an orange. If we keep going down into like a 1000, it's going to be pretty orange. Alright. Now, if we go in the opposite direction, so we were at 6500 to begin with, let's do 8000. So you'll see like that compared to this, it's a little bluer. Yeah, it's a little bluer. And then if I do like a 12,000, it's a lot bluer. It's cooler, I guess we should say. So you get the idea. All right. Same thing with the rest of this. It has you can change, you know, mission focus, specular, all that, shadows. You can go and mess with, you know, different things. So you have options in here. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about spherical lights. So these are lights that are basically different from distance lights in every single way possible. It depends on where they're positioned. It depends on the size. They are very radial in everything they do. So if I go and stick this light here and then render it, you'll see it's not illuminating really anything but what's around it, and that's because it's basically blocking the light. The buildings are, the blocks are. If I go ahead and move this up, maybe we can make it bigger. You'll see it almost, it looks like there should be like a little candle or a light bulb or something right there. And that's basically what this little point light is for. It's for basically just replicating localized light. And it's very good at that. So, good to use for that. What else we got? Cylinder light. This is the light and shape of a cylinder. So basically it will illuminate things that are inside the cylinder. No, actually outside the cylinder, but we can tell it to do the opposite. But that's what it's for. So I don't really use these too much, to be honest. Haven't really run into a need for them, but you know, they do their thing. Okay. Let's do Pixar dome light. Dome lights. So these are kind of funky. It's a kind of like an all over light at once. Like everything is just evenly lit all the time. Yeah, it's kind of, they're kind of weird, but they do have some uses. So because everything's lighting all the time, there's really not much of a shadow, really, other than what you get with ambient occlusion right here, where objects are like really close to each other. But that's really about it. Has intensity. You can put a color map on them, which are kind of interesting. So with these, yes. With these, we can actually put an HDRI image on them, and we can actually mimic outdoor lighting or like real world lighting, which is kind of neat. So let me see if I can actually find. Let me see if I can find it. I think I have some HDRI somewhere, so I'm going to look for them real quick. There we go. Okay. So it'll basically, what's going on is we have this sphere, that's where the dome light's coming from, and we can map images to the sphere. And so then, when we go in and render it, give it 1 second. This will happen when you attach textures. They need a second to actually set up as a renderman texture. So re-render, and there we go. So anything with this is the lighting that's actually hitting the object. That's actually being sampled from the image itself, which is pretty cool. And then things like reflections will actually come off the image. So if I go ahead and like, let's just for example make this guy super freaking shiny. It's going to be reflecting like what's in the environment. So this is really kind of useful. Let's say if you want to make a character that is existing in a real world live plate shot for a film. The scene you would have, you know, like a lighting guy or someone go in and sample the light and create an HDRI map. And then what they could do is the animators would then go in, take that HDRI, put it onto an environmental light, something like this, or a dome light, I mean, and then we could light the character accurately. So it should have like these accurate reflections and specular highlighting and things like that. So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and take that, and we'll leave a little bit of specularity on them. So we'll get a little something, make it a little more interesting. Okay. So anyway, that is a dome light. You can do intensity, exposure, you know, whatever you want. So pretty standard. What else we got? Portal lights. Let's see. I believe these actually need a map to... Actually, yeah. I think they need to be worked in conjunction with like a dome light or something. So I should even create... let's do like a dome light. I don't use portal lights too much, but I've used them in something like Mental Ray, and they had to be used in conjunction with like an environmental system. Hang on one second. Okay, I'm back. I had to go back and check on portal lights just to kind of confirm how they worked. So what I went ahead and did is I actually just made an interior scene real quick with a window. So the thing that I'm just going to demonstrate real quick is that if we go ahead and render a scene real quick with an interior, so if we have like a dome light with an HDRI image that's actually keeping, or that's actually giving us like light from the outside, what we will get is a bit of illumination on the interior of the scene, but it's not going to necessarily give us a whole lot of direct sunlight. It's going to be kind of diffused. So what we can do is we can go and create a portal light that's going to basically act as like a focusing beam or a focuser for that light to come through the window, and we can use it to kind of move it around and intensify it or whatever we really want to do. So the way that we actually need to do this is we're going to go down the dome light shape, and then down here we have a little tab that says portals. And so if I go ahead and click on the little checker box, it'll create a portal. And you'll see actually down in the origin point, it's going to have an attached portal to the dome shape that we can then use to focus the light. So what will happen is if I go ahead and, let's say, just point it up at the ceiling. And then if I go and render, you'll see that now it looks like almost like a little weird portal, but now the light's actually coming up and hitting the wall and the ceiling, and really it's not really relying on the dome light anymore. It's relying more on this. So this will give us just a little bit more control over the lighting coming in from the environment. So it's nice to use it for something like that. So if you want to use it a little more properly, maybe we could go in and like stick it in a window like this. And then we have intensity multipliers here, so we can mess with that if we need to. Let's go ahead and re-render that. So you'll see we're getting a little more lighting in there. And we go in and up that multiplier. Get a lot more light. And there you go. So that's what it's mainly for. The portal light needs to be used in conjunction with something like a dome light. So then we can use that to actually kind of focus that light. It's really more for interior scenes, not necessarily meant for something like an exterior. All right. Alrighty. Let's go to environmental daylight. So these are kind of funky and cool. You'll see it gives us something that looks like a compass right here. So north, south, east, and west. Well, let's just go ahead and render it and see what it looks like. We'll just talk about it. Alright. So, a couple things is the environmental daylight actually gives us a sky and a horizon line. So let me go and something like this. So now we have a sky. It actually also allows us to set the time, the date, longitude, latitude. Allows us to change kind of quite a lot of stuff with the lighting. So if we set something up, we needed accurate lighting, say for August 7th, 2022, for whatever reason, we could actually do that. So we also have, in addition to that, intensity, exposure, all the normal stuff. We have a sky tint, sun direction, sun size, everything else. And then down here, we can change, like, say, let's say, 7th, 2022. Let's say we're going to do it at 12 noon. Time zone, just leave it at whatever it is. And we do latitude, longitude. So if you have a specific part of the Earth that you want that set to, you can set it to that. And then there you go. That's what the lighting would look like. Let's put maybe a couple more objects in here. So there you go. So pretty nifty. Obviously, it's really useful if you're doing something like an outdoor scene. You can use it with something like a portal light if you need to do an indoor scene to get some sunlight coming into a room. So you can kind of use it for a lot of different stuff. Okay, let's do object light. So if you literally want to make something illuminated, this is how you do it. So I'm going to go ahead and make a sphere. I'm going to, with the sphere selected, this right here, I'm going to click on the object light button, and that is going to, it's referred to as mesh light, but I'm used to calling it object light. It's going to basically say pick PXR mesh light. And so now this sphere is illuminated like a light bulb. Kind of cool. Kind of acts like a point light. It's radiating in all directions. You can change your color. You can change your texture color, which is not the same thing as your light color. So if we want like a blue color or blue texture, but red light, we can do that. That does not show up whatsoever. Let's mess with that. Intensity. Let's do maybe like a pink. Could be they just kind of cancel each other out. That's better. So this is pretty useful if you want to do like light bulbs and stuff like in cars or in a house. You can use that. You know, a lot of times if I do like a lamp on a table, I might use an object light to recreate the bulb because that'll shine through objects, and it works pretty well that way. So you can use that for quite a lot of stuff. It's kind of interesting. Okay. All right. So let's, before we go any, I'm not going to talk about Pixar surface yet. Let's talk about volumes right here. So these are kind of neat. This is basically light fog. So what you can do is create a object, and we can assign it a Pixar volume. And let's just go ahead and put a distance light on it. Let's move it over so I can actually see it. And we'll just point it kind of down and over. Okay. And then we're going to give the Pixar volume, let's change the color to green. Alright, so it's really not showing up. Really all we're getting is kind of a little bit of an illuminated green line here. So what's going on is where the volume gets thicker, light does not penetrate through it. So the thinnest parts of this cube are going to obviously be the corners. So that's why we see light coming through this. So if we go in and we do mess with like a density float, we can bring this down, and you'll see we're getting more light penetrating through it. And if I go back down even further, kind of almost looks a little bit like glass, maybe. It's, you know, it has kind of a scattering effect basically with the light. So I'm going to go to 0.05. Now we can actually see an object in here. This kind of sort of looks like maybe underwater, like it's in a tank. It's kind of scattering the light in that way, which maybe like a really murky algae-filled tank of some sort. And then we can go even further. And I'm going down by like a factor of 10 every single time. I'm just removing the decimal point over, so we're dropping like really quickly. And you'll see like how little this actually changes. Maybe I'll do like 0.001, so this is 5 times less dense than what we just had. So I got something like that. So this is really useful if you want to do something like light fog, where like if you're like in an old building or something with like dust particles in the air going through the window, you can kind of do something like that. And make this a little bit thicker. 0.005. So you'll see we get a little bit of that right there. Now, there is some caveats to this. If I move my camera inside of it, it doesn't work. So just be aware. If you set this up in a scene where you want it to look like there's light fog in the scene, this is basically what I would do. Take your cube. Let's say, okay, let's say we're going to do this. I want it inside this room. And a camera needs to be at one end of the room. Alright. So let's go ahead and set up a light real quick. I'm going to get rid of that one. Let's make a rectangle light. Bring it down, bring it over. There you go. Okay. And basically I just want like this volume to kind of encapsulate like this part of the room. But it doesn't need to sit where my camera's going to be. So all I'm going to do is just, let's see, we're going to move the camera right in. There we go. So basically it's just sitting right in front of the box. And then now I'm getting kind of that haziness that we're getting from like a fog. There you go. All right. All right, so let's go and talk about some shader information. So right now we're kind of just working only with the Pixar shader. So we'll just keep that light. We will do a sphere. So for this first project, we're really just going to have you guys mess around with the shaders. You're not going to be doing any texturing or anything. So really, it's going to be pretty simple to work with. And let's do something to kind of reflect off of. Actually, we will do that dome light again. I'm going to go and give these all a... actually, I'm going to do different Pixar surfaces. I'm going to do one here, right-click, Pixar surface, Pixar surface, Pixar surface. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and name... we can rename these if we need to. So I'm going to go into the attribute editor, click on Pixar surface 5. We're going to rename it ball 3 shader. We can do ball 2. And then ball 1. Ground shader. Okay. Ground shader, we're going to go and change the color of that to, let's do something like a, kind of maybe like a pastel purple? Lilac, maybe. And this one on the end, we're going to change this to a kind of yellowish. This one we're going to change over to a light greenish blue. And then this one we will do bright red. Okay. And let's go ahead and just rearrange these so that they're all going to be able to reflect off each other and whatnot. Hit 3 to smooth them so we don't have any faceting. Yeah, so let's go take... Okay, well, we'll just keep it. Alright. So, if I go ahead and just render this as is, the only thing I've changed is the color. That's it. This is a really matte surface. There's not really any specular highlighting. There's not really any sort of reflections. So it's pretty flat. So we can see that the color is pretty uniform. We don't see really much information from the environment kind of reflecting on these. We do see a little bit of indirect where maybe a little bit of red's coming down here, a little purple's up here. But other than that, it's pretty average. So a couple things we can do with the shaders. First thing I kind of mentioned was changing the specularity or the reflectivity, which I did with the blocks showing the kind of the reflection of the HDRI image. So if I go under primary specular right here, face color basically is going to be the amount of reflection that we can do on the shader. So if it's a black, it can't reflect anything. But if we change it up to like a white, then you're going to see it's much more reflective than the other two balls. In fact, we're going to get the light, the little rectangle light. We're going to get the environment. We're going to get some of this from the ground. So it's going to be showing a lot of stuff in here. So if I go and do the same thing for this one. Actually, you know what? If we go maybe a quarter of the way, we'll see the difference. So this one's going to have some reflection to it, but it's not going to be as much as this ball. So it's going to be a little bit darker. It's not going to be quite as in focus. And if I go over to this one, and I do give it full focus, however, what I can do is change roughness. So if I bring roughness down, it's going to give me a clearer reflection versus this one right here, where this one has a little bit of roughness to it. Think of roughness as like surface scattering, surface image scattering on the reflection, so it doesn't perfectly reflect. Like a chrome ball or a mirrored ball would perfectly reflect an image. Something that's maybe like stainless steel may not do it, brushed metal, something like that, isn't going to reflect perfectly. You know, brushed metal actually will reflect basically terribly. But that's what the roughness is for, is it gives us that ability to kind of mess around with this. So if I go and up my roughness all the way, you'll see that it's basically kind of matte. It doesn't really have any reflection to it, but it's what it's doing is it's basically picking up all the reflection and roughening it up and smearing it to the point that it's just not showing up at all. So it's going all the way from one extreme of a mirror to the opposite extreme. So if we go down to something in the middle, because maybe you want some of that reflection, but you don't really want the images to be that well visible, you can do that. So you can get something like this. So it's almost a little kind of pearlish, I'd say. We can change edge color if we want to. So this is going to be like reflections like along the outside edge of an object. And so maybe we can go ahead and change. Let's do, what color is that ball anyway? That's blue. So what will we really notice? Let's do like a gold. So we'll see some yellow right through here. And that's basically going to be that edge color coming in. Alright, let's make another one of these. Well, actually, there's no really no need to, because it's going to be the same shader anyway, so I'll just keep messing with the shader. So I'm going to bring the edge color back down to that. I'm going to take face color down to something kind of, you know, about maybe 30% over. Something to kind of think of when you're doing this is you're going to notice that your render times kind of start to go up a little bit as you start adding some of these features in, because right now all this stuff is turned off, but once we start adding this stuff in, you'll notice the render times go up. And that's because really what's happening is RenderMan is trying to calculate all the stuff that you're asking for it, all the reflections, all the shadows, any translucencies or any light passing through objects, anything like that. That all adds time. So just be aware that the more stuff you add on here, it's going to bump up render time by, you know, seconds, minutes, heck, even hours. So just be aware of that. All right. Rough specular, that's very similar to the primary specular. It has a lot of the same features, but it's basically just going to be kind of like an overall specular. So if we go in and turn off this and turn on that, that's what you get. So let me actually turn down the roughness. So there you go. It's basically just another layer of specularity that you can add in. The reason why is the reason why we have two is because we can actually add in multiple sets of maps for specularity. So like say for example, if you have an object that's like has like a coating on it but also has scratches, or maybe it has paint flakes, something like that, we can add that stuff in into multiple layers, and we can create kind of a a unique layered shader that basically reflects what we're trying to create. So that's what it's for. Going to take that down. So we should have a pretty dull object. So something like this. Next is going to be clear coat. So clear coat is basically another specular layer. But what this is, just imagine you dip something in shellac, and that's what the clear coat's for. So you can work on like adding, you know, like details and stuff. Like say for example, if I made, you know, a model of my face, I would have probably a map that would give me details for like say pores, and I could put that into the primary specular. If I had, you know, maybe I had a bloody nose, or the character I had been crying or something like that, I might have a specular map that might be like where the blood was coming down or the tears were coming down, and that'd be like a shiny area. And so you could do a rough specular there. And then the clear coat might be, you know, if I was wet, like if I had been like dipped in like water or some sort of chemical or something like that, that could be what a clear coat would be for. Okay, let's turn that down. Iridescence. So iridescence is kind of neat. Gives you kind of a, well, let's take a look. It's kind of like when gasoline kind of is in a puddle. You get that kind of iridescent look to it, where it kind of does like a color shift of everything. That's what this is really kind of meant for. So the neat thing is you can do independent face gain and edge gain. So say if I do no face gain and only edge gain. So we'll change the color here on the edge, but then I can add in face. You'll see the color shift right here. And then we can also change the color, primary and secondary colors that are being used. So maybe if we don't want it to be like red and blue, maybe we want to change it to like, I don't know, purple and green. You can see it changes quite a bit. Okay, I'm going to turn all that off. Alright, fuzz. Fuzz is kind of like felt. Maybe like, what is that material that they had? A lot of people made like suits of it in the 80s. Velvet. It's like velvet. So go ahead and just take a re-render of just this thing by itself. So that's what it looks like with nothing. Then we do a fuzz. It's not like it's real hair. It's just a kind of, it just kind of looks like it is a little fuzzy. That's what it basically is for. And make sure I don't have anything else turned on. Okay, now we're fine. All right, so we can go ahead and let's maybe do a color for the fuzz. You do like a green. So maybe we get a little bit of highlight for the green here. We can mess with the cone angle. It's not showing us a whole lot. Let's try something else. I want to show you guys what this looks like. It's kind of weird. Let's do. Maybe just try a different angle. Because it's kind of basically like just how the light bounces off of it. So we see it maybe a little bit right here. Let me take off that dome light. Yeah, there we go. So it's just basically just a little trick, you know, just kind of turns it just a little green. If we go, like, say, let's do, so right now the main color is like that. Let's go with a white, just so we have something to kind of compare it to. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes because with the mixing of colors. Yeah, there we go. So you'll see, like, back here on the back end, we get like a little highlight of red. It's got kind of a pinkish tone in general. Okay. Alright. right. So I'm going to turn fuzz off. Let's go into subsurface. Let's do actually... I'm just going to do this because this has like actual like thin areas that we can actually see with the light coming through, whereas the sphere is kind of just not great for showing subsurface. So let's do a little Pixar shader on this guy. So we will make him, just make him white. And then I'm going to go down to subsurface. So this one, basically this is how we do skin. That's what it's for. It's for light going through the object, bouncing around, and illuminating the back end of the object in some way. So it allows us to create skin, jello, translucent objects, that kind of thing. So it's kind of cool. So if we go ahead and bring up the subsurface, and then go ahead and render. So what we'll see is it's going to look a little plasticky, rubbery, maybe a little marbly, like it's made out of something like a marble or stone that's translucent a little bit. Because we can see here light kind of coming through, especially more like right here. So it's kind of interesting how this works. It's a fun shader to play around with. This is going to be one of those ones that takes up render time. But just because the light bouncing in, scattering around, and then coming out the back end or another direction, it just takes time, and so just be patient with it. Alright, so under subsurface we have a couple of options. If you change the subsurface model, we have basically 6 different mathematical models to use. Honestly, I wish I could explain all the math and stuff that goes behind these. I can't. Smarter people than me can. But in my experience, using Jensen dipole is pretty simple. You just kind of change the gain, the color, and the back color, and then you can change like some distance stuff. But if you go under like better Dion dipole, it gives you, I feel like it's I don't want to say better, it's a different result. It's not necessarily better or worse. But I've liked what I've gotten from it, playing around with it. So, is it better or worse? I don't know. It looks pretty similar here. But just me kind of fiddling around with it, that's what I kind of get. But either one works. You can honestly mess with like all of these, and I honestly would say go ahead, do it. Play with all of them, see what you get. Some of these are better for like small objects like gummy bears. Some of these are better for big objects like elephants, because light travels differently depending on the scale of the object is passing through. It'll illuminate a gummy bear much more easily than it will, a gummy bear the size of an elephant. It's just going to look completely different. So that's what these really are made for. So anyway, let's just go with Jensen dipole real quick, and we'll just talk about kind of what this does. So gain obviously is turning it on or off. If you turn it down, you're going to get less of that effect. Turn it up, you're going to get more of that effect. We have a color here. So color, this is independent of diffuse that we have up on top. So let's say if if you're making a character with like a color, with a color map or something, you would want to plug that into this as well, because this is a separate color. So we can do like a green or something. And you'll see that it comes through. Now the neat thing is that you're going to get different colors on the front face and the back face. Front faces are going to be wherever the light hits directly. Back face being wherever the light does not hit, but the light travels through and comes out the back. So this right here, you'll see we're getting kind of a warmer tone, where this is more of a green, lighter tone. So here, you'll notice we get these same tones, color, and then the free path color. So if I go in and change this free path color to something, like a blue, you'll see that it changes this color. So this is a little warm. It feels like, you know, maybe it's, you know, it just has a different property to it, where this feels a little more solid, a little more cool. Let's go maybe with a brighter red. So it looks very similar to the first one we messed with. And then free path distance, this is going to be the distance the light travels through the object. So higher the number, the more easily it's going to travel through. Lower the number, it's not going to travel through as much. So if we do like a 1, so you'll see it's a much darker object than this. And if we change it to 100, it's going to travel through a little bit more. All right. So let's go ahead and turn that down. We do have a single scatter in here. This is similar to the subsurface, but it's going to be basically just light scattering through the object. A little bit more simply, so we can turn that on. So it's not real complicated, but we can put that in there if we want. We have a glass option, so if we want to make something look like glass, we can turn down or turn on these options right here. So there you go, it's glass. Super easy. And then we can do a refraction color. So that'll be basically the color of the glass. Alright, we turn that off. We have a glow option in here, so that is going to kind of turn it into a light. Not necessarily fully a light, but it's going to kind of replicate it. So you'll see that this is kind of illuminating this object here. So illuminating the object on the ground. We can also change the color of that. You'll see that it is glowing, but it is still picking up highlighting information. So if you want to make something like, I don't know, I guess a tesseract, this might be an option to do that. So we got that option. All right, under here is globals. This is going to be a couple, basically kind of just a couple things that we can link together. First one's called bump. And for what it's worth, we have bump basically under most of these other channels in here. Let's do clear coat. Clear coat's got a bump channel. So bump basically allows us to add basically details to an object. So let's say if I wanted to add a bump, I can click on here. And I'm going to go, this is just creating a render node. Anything we use in RenderMan, we have to use RenderMan nodes. So don't use anything up here. None of that. Only RenderMan. And you'll need to actually click on create a Pixar bump. Sorry, I was explaining what the bump was. So basically it just allows us to add details to an object. So I'm going to go and create the bump node. And then in there, where were you? Oh yeah, the bump's right here. So I can go in and basically put in, like, say, a pattern, or I could put in a texture. So if I have like a picture of some sort that I want to use as a bump, I can do that, or I can use a pattern that's just procedurally made. So I'm going to click on here to create a pattern, and let's do a fractal, and just see what it looks like. So there we go. So now we got this rough, rocky looking box. And so this can be controlled by using, if we go under the bump node itself, we can actually change the scale of the bump if we want it to be lighter. You can do like a 0.2 on the bump scale right here. And then you'll notice the detail's there, but it's not as extreme as it was before. Alright, so there's more to bumps than just that, but that's super introductory, just how to set up a bump. We'll go over it more when we're talking about actually like UV mapping and creating textures and stuff. All right, presence. So presence is basically like a cutout option for an object. So if you have like a map or something that's like a black and white map that you want to use to like cut out like parts of an object, like say a checkerboard or something, we can use that. So actually, let's just do pattern pxr checker. And actually, I need to go in the hypershade for this one. We got a lot of stuff here. What are you even called anymore? What is this? Pixar Surface 6. Okay. Is this you right here? Okay. By the way, I'm just graphing this on the hypershade. If you never opened up the hypershade before, the hypershade is used for all materials inside of Maya. So any materials, textures, utilities, lights, you can find that here. If it's in the scene, it's actually situated here. So like our Pixar rectangle light is here. All the materials we created previously are sitting here. So if you need to get to them, this is a really good way to do it. And I access it just by going up to this little button right here, this little sphere with a highlight on it, a little dot. And if you need to ever like access any of the other stuff in here, just right click, graph it, and then you have it right here. Okay. Also going to take this opportunity to kind of explain the shader setup. So this is actually the shader. This is the Pixar Surface 6 that we've been messing with the entire time. It's the exact same thing that we've just been kind of scrolling through and messing with. You'll see this thing attached right here. This is a PXR Surface 6 SG. This is actually what's called a shader group, and basically it just kind of oversees, and we run all the shader information through the shader group node. All right, so we were talking about presence, and so the presence allows us to cut out parts of an object, at least visibly cut out parts of an object. So let's say if I wanted to create, use a checker pattern to cut out pieces. I could do that by going in, let's do the checker right here. So this is the checker node. By the way, this is a node editor style interface. So we kind of connect things one to the other, so on and so forth. And so what we'll do is you'll see presence down here. You also will notice little dots next to each one of these. These are meaning that we can actually connect different nodes into all this stuff. So where I had the bump before, there was like another thing that I created that was like the PXR bump. There was actually a node attached to it called PXR bump. All right. So what I'm going to do is just click on result R right here. And we'll go back over this later on. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that, attach it, and we'll see if this works. I may have to change a couple things, but see if it works. Okay, did not work, so let's check something here. I may need to tell the checker like how many repetitions I want. So I'm going to go, and I'm going to create something called a manifold. The manifold is, if I click on the PXR checker, this guy, click on manifold. This is a node that I can create to tell a map, really any node, how often I want that map to repeat within what's called a UV space. So think of it as like texture, how many times you want the texture to repeat. This is what that node is for. So I'm going to do a PXR manifold 2D. And so that clicks, you actually see where it kind of goes into from here down to the manifold section right there. And we have a scale option right here. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to like 20 by 20. So scale S and T. So I'm just going to make a repeat a lot. And we'll see, does that work? Okay, let's figure out why that's not working. I'm going to run this up into the diffuse color. Okay, there it is. So what I'm kind of wanting is really just the white squares to show through, and I want the black squares to be invisible. So that's what the presence should do for us. Actually, it probably doesn't like it because it doesn't have a alpha channel on it. So that might be why it's not liking this. We can try. Let's try something else. Try this. We have a 2-float node that we can use, and basically that converts color information into just black and white images. So I'm going to go and take this, take that result F and put that here. I want to see if that works. Not really, no. Okay. Well, it's not really that important though, because I'm actually going to come back to it and we'll talk about presences like when we're making things like trees. If you want to do like trees, we can use a presence to basically take like an alpha off of like a texture map of like a branch or a flower. So like a tree, for example, might have 25,000 leaves on it, but it would be kind of insane to try to create a tree with literally 25,000 modeled leaves on it. So what you might do is have a tree with a bunch of planes, and then the planes are used to basically have an alpha on them, which is the presence, that allows us to kind of cut out leaf shapes, and that's how we might get like an approximation of 25,000 leaves on a tree without actually having to model the 25,000. And it kind of works because leaves are really thin and kind of paper-like, so it allows us to kind of get through that a little bit. If you ever seen like anime, CG anime films, sometimes they'll have like planes for the hair. You kind of can tell it's planes. They kind of all move as one piece, but like it's like painted or something. You'll see alpha maps basically put onto the hair that cuts out the plane itself, so we just have the hair shape left. So that's what that's meant for. All right. See if there's anything else I want to talk about with this. No, I think I'm good. So let's see if there's anything else you want to do before I finish up this introduction. Yeah, okay. Let's talk about render settings real quick, because this will be quick. So if we go up to RenderMan, open up the render settings, we can set up a few things in here that might help you out, or just kind of explain it. Maybe make the image look a little bit better. So when you open it up, make sure that you click render using RenderMan. Very important. And then under here, we have things like frame range. So frame range, either you're going to be rendering the current frame, or you might be batch rendering an animation. Now, we're not going to be batch rendering yet. We might be doing that. I think we're going to be doing that on the next project. Actually, to be honest, we might end up doing it on this project. So it doesn't matter. We're going to get there. And we also have things like renderable camera. So depending on what camera you want to batch render out of, we can actually set up that option. A lot of the times, like when I'm doing films and stuff, I do not actually render out of the perspective camera. I will set up a actual physical camera, like a main render cam, and I will render out of that one. So that frees the perspective camera to move around and do different stuff and whatever I really want. Image size. So if you've noticed, we actually been rendering really quickly. And right here, it says that my image size is 960 by 540. So that's pretty small. You'll see under image size here, it says HD 540. So that's a really small render size. It's not going to give you a lot of pixels, on the vertical and horizontal. It's going to be pretty quick. It's going to be kind of, it doesn't look great, but it's good for getting quick renders out. Okay? Now, what I'm going to be expecting you guys to do is that when you guys are turning in images to me, you guys will be rendering in HD 1080. So that means you are going to be rendering in a resolution of 1920 by 1080. All right? That's all I'm going to accept. When we do some batch renders, I might change it depending on how long your renders are taking, but that's going to be pretty standard. Okay? That's what I render my films at. That's what most stuff you're going to be seeing is doing right now. Maybe eventually we could go to like a 2K or 4K, but it's just not really needed right now. So HD 1080 is going to be what you'll be using. You will notice that render times will go up pretty drastically, switching from 540 to 1080. So just be aware of that. That's normal because you're rendering like 4 times the amount of frames, or not frames, but pixels. All right. Let's go to RenderMan. Okay. So here we have different tabs. We have options for min samples and max samples. So what this means is basically the sampling per pixel inside the image. So 128 is it's not bad. It's kind of low. It's not terribly high. A lot of times you'll see stuff goes up to like 256, 540, things like that, and it'll smooth out the image. So if we actually go, and let's just render what we have right now. So I want to show you kind of what it looks like when we fully render an image at different sample rates. So let's just go and fully render this one. So something to keep in mind is the lower the sample rate, the faster it will render. The higher the sample rate, the slower it will render. Okay, because what's basically happening is the light, the camera, it's basically working with a numerically higher number of samples. Basically, as the light shoots out, the light rays is bouncing around, and it shoots out more if you raise the samples, shoots out less if you do fewer samples. So at 128 at 960 by 540, we do have some noise right here and here. Okay, that's kind of what I focus in on when I look at these images, is just seeing the amount of noise actually in the image. Now, this noise can be coming from the sampling, or it could be coming from the render size. But we can kind of work with the sampling to see if maybe we can kind of get that down a little bit. Now, let's take this to an extreme And let's go to like 32 samples. Let's drop it down. See how ugly this thing can get. So, render it again. Now you'll notice it's rendering really quickly. Okay. Render time at 12 seconds versus 38 seconds. So we're looking at a lot less samples and a lot quicker render time. So if you want to do really quick renders and you're trying to look at stuff really, really fast, drop those samples down. It's perfectly usable to do that. That's fine. So the difference, let's go and zoom in. So this is 32 and that's 128. So that's a pretty big difference. You guys should be able to see this on your screen. There's a lot of noise here. It's a lot of grain. Not good. This does not look good at all. It's like something off of like a video from like 1996 or something. It's pretty ugly. But here, you see a lot more the gradient from light to black. You see more color variation in here. It looks so much nicer than this. So, big difference. Now, if we go up to, let's say 128, we'll double. Wow, that was actually a 60. No, it was 32. Okay. So 128, let's do 256. So we're doubling from what we had before. And we'll see what we can get from this. 256 is kind of what I was working with over on some of my stuff over the summer. It's not as high as you can go. You can go way higher to smooth out an image. And if you're working with only turning in a single image to me, it's probably worth it to go ahead and render out something with a much higher sample rate or sample load. So you may want to bring it even higher than that. But you will notice that at like a certain point, you will see a diminishing return on your sample size. So if you start raising it to like 500, 1,000, 2,000, there might not be much of a difference between a sample of 2,000 and 1,000 in terms of quality. But there might be a bigger difference between, like, say, 500 and 1,000. But there might be a time jump of, let's say, from a minute a frame to 20 minutes a frame between, like, a 1,000 and a 2,000. Is that really worth, the little tiny incremental extra bit you get? That's kind of up to you and what you want to, spend your time on. So, anyway. So let's go and take a look at this. So this is 256, I think. And so we'll see. So this is 128. And that's 256. So it's not that much different. Now, granted, if we were rendering at 1920 by 1080, we would be able to tell the difference between this and this. You can see it. It's more. There's a little less noise. It's a little softer. Looks a little nicer. Okay. Difference in render time: 38 seconds, 46 seconds. We're going all the way to the bottom at 12 seconds to 46. So, bit of a difference there. All right. Pixel variance. So this is going to be basically an option for, like, say, how much it goes in and actually, like, renders or samples, like, black areas. So, like, the lower the number, the more sampling it's going to be doing in there. So it's going to take up a lot more time, okay? The higher the number, so like a 0.1, 0.5, something like that, it's going to go a lot quicker, but the render probably won't look as good. So let's just do 128 again. But let's take the pixel variance up to like a 0.1. So that was a render time of 8 seconds. So that was actually quicker than when we had the one that was set at like, what, 32? So here is the original 128. And then this is the pixel variance. Like, the only thing that's different is the pixel variance. And so you'll see things are a lot rougher. They don't look as smooth. They just don't look that good versus that. So big difference in that. But it renders a lot faster. So you can kind of mess with that if you need it to kind of like, I guess, finesse the black areas for you, the shadows and things like that. So if you want to go the opposite direction, I think it was like 0.01 before, so we can like a 0.001. And then we go back again, render. And so we should see a jump in the quality, but we will have a longer render time with this. So what it's doing right now is basically going back and re-rendering like little little dark areas and trying to like smooth out different areas. That's essentially what it's doing. And you'll notice it's taking a lot longer than the previous one. So that was 52 seconds. So just by changing that pixel variance, we went from 8 seconds to 52 seconds. Now, is this better than... Not that one. This one. I would say I don't know. I can't really tell, to be honest. Again, we're kind of at a low resolution anyways, so this would be something we could probably tell at 1920 by 1080, but here at 960 by 540, it's not. Oh, that is, but that I don't see much of a difference. But anyway, at 1080, we probably would be able to tell a little bit of a difference. So, all right. Let's go ahead and change. And to be honest, pixel variance, usually I kind of stick around like 0.01 anyways. So leave that there. Min samples, if you want to kind of clamp the min samples and max samples, you can. So let's say if you want the dark areas, the areas where it doesn't really need to render or sample that much area anyways because light's just not getting in there, you can actually tell it to, forcibly go in and sample, that area if you need to. So that's what the min samples is for. You can, give it a value or something. So that's an option for you. So let's talk about features, AOVs. No, I'm not going to do AOVs right now. Let's just leave that out. So I think we'll, actually, you know what? I think we'll stop there. That should be good enough for you guys, so you can just kind of play around and kind of work on improving image quality and stuff. So yeah. All right. So I think that's going to work for the introduction to RenderMan. If you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to shoot me an email. It is a complicated program, but once you guys get the handle of it and kind of understand the language, it should come pretty naturally for you. So anyway, the next video I'm going to do is the first assignment. That's actually going to be a 2-week assignment, so we will take a look at it when I get back. I'll go ahead and kind of give you guys... I'll go ahead and just kind of tell you a little bit about the assignment, but the next video is I'm actually going to kind of demo the assignment for you guys and talk about how I would approach it and what I would do. So it's going to be a project-based video. So, all right. So it is called The Gang Makes a Parody. I really like It's Always Sunny, so I always like to name my assignments weird things. So anyway, this is basically just you guys are going to be recreating some sort of cinematic shot in Maya from a film. Now, it doesn't have to be, literally the shot. It does not have to be like, say, Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker on a catwalk and one of them has a hand removed. It needs to be a parody of that somehow. So kind of like a recreation, but, with a bit of a funny twist. So you guys have to use at least one character rig. I'm going to provide a couple of them, but you can go out and find your own. Character rigs are basically our puppets. So why not utilize any opportunity to play with a character rig if you can. So basically just go in and recontextualize a shot. You're going to reference the shot and give me basically a screenshot of that particular shot you are referencing. It's going to be up to you to copy the lighting, the general shaders. So like if things are going to be really shiny or matte or kind of rough or whatever, you're going to be referencing that as much as humanly possible. You're not going to be doing any textures in this. It's just going to be creating kind of materials, playing with the Pixar surface shaders. Okay, so this should be a pretty funny image or pretty funny project, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Yeah. So anyway, if you guys want to kind of like run ideas past me, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd love to hear what you guys are coming up with. You guys will be turning in an image for me in a TIFF format, and then you will also be turning in a screenshot of the referenced shot that you were inspired by. Okay, it's going to have to be 1920 by 1080, and it's going to be due September 4th is the day that I'm going to be back. So it'll be due that day. So we'll be having a critique then, and then we'll be moving on to our next project. So that's it. Yeah. So anyway, make sure you like, subscribe, and see you in the next video. Have a good one.